Hey there! How's everybody's Tuesday morning going? I wanted to pop in and demonstrate a little something for you that's based on a problem that I've had in the past and will probably have again in the future, and one that I have a feeling a lot of people have happened to them every now and then. Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You are knitting a project, for example, my Swing with the Wind cowl, and you're alternating between knit stitches and purl stitches, and then there comes a row in which you have to do something a little differently. For example, where you were knitting 4 and purling 2, you now have to knit 4 and purl 8, and maybe you've lost track of your rows or rounds, or maybe you just kind of switched off your brain for a few seconds and you look down at your knitting and you realize that you completely missed a bunch of purl stitches that you were supposed to do. Or conversely, maybe you got a little carried away with your purl stitches and you look at your knitting and you realize that you've got way too many purl stitches in there. One or the other, or maybe even both. It happens. And if you're anything like me, sometimes, oh, hello, Lupe. Nice to see you. Sometimes you might not even realize that this has happened until you get to the next row around. And then what do? Well, you could very painstakingly unknit all those stitches, go right back to where you messed up and redo it. Or you could do what I do, and you can switch those knit stitches into purl stitches or the purl stitches into knit stitches. Yes, it's possible. I wouldn't call it, well, it's not easy until you've practiced it a couple times, like so many things in knitting. So I'm going to demonstrate for you how I do this, how I will switch a stitch on the needles from a knit stitch to a purl stitch without going back and unknitting. Okay, so I'm going to turn my camera around so that you're staring down at my lap where I have my knitting, and we'll get started. Whee! All right. So this is the cowl that I am working on for my father-in-law, so hopefully he's not watching. Okay, so here we have, let me show you what we have here. This is, again, my Swing with the Wind cowl, and you can see right here I'm supposed to start adding these purl ridges, and I've gotten here and I've actually made 2 mistakes. And the funny thing was, one of them I made on purpose for the purpose of this live, and the other I completely did it on accident, which just absolutely cracks me up. These 2 stitches right here, if you look carefully, you can see they're actually knit stitches. You see how there's those, let's see, hopefully you can see this. Sometimes my camera likes to go out of focus, but you see these are actually knit stitches, and they're supposed to be purl stitches because they're supposed to be part of the purl stitches that come in between these knit stitch patterns, sections, excuse me. And then, of course, right here, this is the part that I did on purpose, that should have the purl ridge like this, but it doesn't. So we are going to fix that. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here to the stitch below, the live stitch, and we're just going to grab it with our knitting needle. Unless, of course, the knitting needle is completely uncooperative and doesn't want to grab the stitch in question. There we go. Okay, so we've got it grabbed, and now you see how I just yanked that stitch right off the needle. And now if you just pull right here, that stitch will come right out. Okay, but of course you've got a live stitch on the needle, so we're no worries here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move this back over to this needle. What we're going to do now is we're going to get this loose yarn here. We're going to put it right in front of that live stitch, okay? Because whenever you're changing from knit to purl, you need this loose yarn to be in the front. So now I'm going to take my needle tip, I'm going to push it into the stitch from back to front, just like you're getting ready to purl basically. But here, instead of taking your working yarn and purling, you're basically just going to grab this loose stitch and purl it. And what I normally do is I just kind of grab it like that and then pull it through. And there you go. There you have it. You have a purl stitch. It is a little twisted, so I'm just going to move it back so it's no longer twisted. And then you can just purl it and it's like nothing happened. Now, if you do have a pattern in which you've got several stitches, what I usually do is I go ahead and change them all to purl stitches first, and then I will go back and purl them. So I'm sure you'd like to see that demonstrated again anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So first I grab that stitch on the row below, pull it right off, take this stitch. If you kind of pull the stitches apart, you can see that yarn bar there. Just go ahead and pull until it's completely free of that stitch. Again, we're going to pull it in front, put it in front of the live stitch. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to this needle. Push your needle tip into the front of the needle from back to front. Grab that yarn bar, maybe. Let's see here. I love how when I hop on here to do a demonstration, I suddenly forget everything I knew about knitting. I swear that happens. Okay, so there we go. No. There we go. No. Yes, okay, here we go. Ah! All right. Stop being like this. All right, let's see. Maybe if I grab it down, there we go. Okay. There we are. I just lost all my viewers. They're like, oh, she doesn't know how to do this after all. I swear I do. Okay, so there we go. We've got another purl stitch reclaimed. So now we're going to do it again. Grab that yarn, or grab that stitch down here, pull the live stitch off, pull that yarn bar out so it's loose, put the yarn in the front, slide it over to this needle, and again, the reason I do that is just so it's kind of like we're just purling a stitch. All right, so tucking that under, there we go. Okay, we've got 2 more to do, I think. No, my bad, 3 more to do. All right, grab that stitch, slide the live stitch off, pull that live stitch out completely, pop it back onto the needle, pull the yarn bar into the front, and then purl it. Okay, 2 more to go. Pull the stitch onto the needle, pull out the live stitch, put the yarn bar in the front, and then purl. And 1 more. Pull that stitch up onto the needle, pull the live stitch out, slide that yarn bar into the front, and purl it. Oops, I came so close. Let's try that again. And there we go, purl it. And there you have it. Now, obviously, my working yarn is all the way back here, so I'm just going to slide these purl stitches and kind of untwist them as needed, because a lot of times when you do this technique, the stitches will be twisted and you'll want to untwist them, unless you're twisting them on purpose. And I think we're back to our working yarn now. Yes, there's our working yarn. So now I'm just going to go ahead and purl those stitches. And we are right back where we started. We're back on track. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions while I'm demonstrating. I'm going to finish up this part of the round. I will then flip this over and we'll talk about switching from purl stitches to knit stitches. All right. can see I'm using the magic loop method in case you're curious. And if you need help with the magic loop method, I can link you to some live videos I did regarding magic loop. All right. So doing good so far. We've got our purl ridge here that I did do correctly earlier. And if I remember correctly, I think this is where I overdid our purl ridge. Yes, it is. Okay. So see right here, that doesn't belong there. The purl ridges for my pattern belong only on the long portions and not on these shorter portions, excuse me. So I've got the purl columns between correct, but now I need to switch these into knit stitches. So it's very much the same sort of process that I demonstrated earlier, but in reverse. So we are, again, this is almost a little easier because the purl bumps, excuse me, the purl bumps are a lot easier to see than the knit stitches. So you're just going to grab that purl bump right in the front. You're going to put it on your left hand needle tip. And again, this is just going to pull right out, and the yarn bar is hanging out right here. The loose yarn bar is hanging out right here in the front. You'll need to move this to the back because we're turning this into a knit stitch, and knit stitches are worked from the back. So now that we have that yarn bar in the back here, we're just going to put our needle tip into the stitch here, the live stitch, and somehow it got twisted. I'm not sure how it got twisted, but it got twisted. Anyway, so we're going to put our needle tip in front to back. We're going to grab that yarn bar, and we're just going to pull it right in, just like we're doing a knit stitch. Okay, so here you can see it's now a knit stitch. Again, the stitch is twisted, but we'll take care of that once we're done. So here we go again. We're going to grab the purl bump, pop it onto our needle tip. I'm going to pull out that what was a live stitch and now this loose yarn bar. I'm going to move that to the back so it's behind the stitch. And now it's just going to be like we're knitting a stitch. We're going to put our needle tip in like we're knitting, grab that yarn bar, and pull it onto our right needle. Now I will warn you, and I'll demonstrate it when I do this next one, you want to be careful not to accidentally pull off the next stitch on your needle. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. Okay, we're going to grab the purl bump, stick it onto our left hand needle, pull out that loose yarn, put the yarn in the back of the stitch, pop the needle tip in front to back, grab that yarn bar. Okay, this is what I mean. When we're pulling this off, you want to make sure you're pulling off that part right there and not your next stitch. Okay, so just be very careful of that. All right, so we have one more. Grab that purl bump, slide it onto your needle tip, pull out the loose yarn, move it to the back, insert your needle tip front to back, grab that loose yarn, and pull it right off. And now all of those purl stitches are now knit stitches. Go ahead and put them back onto the left hand needle. Make sure they're not twisted. Some of them are, and that's fine. We can easily untwist. And now we're back where we need to be. I'm going to go ahead and move my yarn to the back and knit those stitches. And there we go. It's like the mistake was never made to begin with. Now, another spot where this can come in handy is if you are doing any kind of ribbing and you realize that you've accidentally miscounted your knit stitches or your rib stitches, and maybe you don't realize that until either the very end of the row or the round, or maybe you don't realize it until you actually get to the next one. Again, it's a really easy way to go ahead and change it so that your ribbing is correct and you've got the correct number of nip stitches and purl stitches. And at times it can be a lot less, I wouldn't say it's easier necessarily, but it's definitely a lot less frustrating. At least I have found it that way. All right, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera back around. Ooh, I almost lost my picture entirely there. All right. Any questions about that technique? About when you might want to use it, about just anything. Did anything look weird to you? Was it clear? Let me ask you that, because this is one of the rare times when I've used actually worsted weight yarn in one of my knitting demonstrations, because normally I use, you know, bulky yarn because it's easier to see. But I wanted to try it this way because this is actually a project I'm knitting, and I didn't want to have to knit up an entirely new swatch just for this. So if you prefer it with the bulky weight yarn, please let me know. And even if you want me to do another one with bulky weight yarn so it's easier to see, I'll be happy to do that as well. Some things I will share with you in the links in the comments. Number one, if this pattern intrigues you, this is the very beginning of my Swaying with the Wind cowl, and that appears in my Swaying with the Wind pattern ebook. If you're interested in that, I will link to my sales page for my Swaying with the Winds patterns ebook. If you would like to sign up for my free newsletter, the Knitting Nuggets newsletter, I will add a link to the comments about that. And also, if you would like to join my free Knitting for Charity with Nicole Facebook group, filled with lots and lots and lots of charity knitters and crocheters. We now have well over 1,000 members, and it's awesome. We have such a great time in there, and we love to encourage each other. So I will offer the link in the comments so that you can join if you would like to as well. It's a free group. It is a closed group, but it is totally free. And I approve members as soon as I can. So, and that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. I hope you will find it useful, not just for my patterns, but for any patterns in which you're knitting and purling a lot of stitches and sometimes lose count and mess things up and not realize it until you're on the next row around. Really helpful for that. All right, if you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will answer them as soon as I can. That is all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.